One of the things that it says in this document is that they want to change the status of refugee and migrants. Now, a migrant, a person who moves from one place to another in order to find work or better living conditions. So under that premise, the migrant doesn't have necessarily all the same rights that a refugee would have, i.e. a refugee, I guess, comes under more emergency status because of their plight. A migrant, however, is doing it for their own gain, so they're not entitled to as much. Now, this document discusses that they want to level the playing field, i.e. they want to make more migrant status more in line with refugee status. It's all about human rights. They're trying to raise the human right level of a migrant. The same again, when you look at this, there's so many different aspects and points that I'm not going to talk about. I'm just literally going to put up little key bullet points, as it were. Now, at the moment, we have a situation with the mass migration. People are reacting to that, probably in how they see it as the most obvious way, because that is the obvious thing that is happening to them, the slow Islamification of their land, as it were. Not to say that that means that they're nationalist and populist, but as indigenous people, they can see a change under the guise of multiculturalism. But in reality, to the most informed people, they can see it as a more socialistic event that's taking place in real time, that's affecting their generation and generations beneath them, to the point where it will never be reversed. So you can understand why the level of anger, you can understand why people are acting in the way that they do. I can understand why people totally disagree with that. For me, I think Islam is being used as a tool. You've got to keep it even, although we have got issues that need talking about. So that is obvious. So for me, it always comes under the guise of radical Islam and not just Islam, as it were, as a whole. I can see why people would want to just blame Islam, but for me, fundamentally, I think you're travelling down the wrong path by doing that. And by doing that, you could argue that you're setting yourself up and you're setting anyone else up in the future that may want to tackle this argument. That is my personal opinion. I know other people do believe that as well. If you look at the state of the country in its demise over the past 30, 40 years, do you honestly say it is all because of Islam? I cannot say that. I have many issues why I feel the world is going the way it is, why the food we eat, what we eat, why the financial system totally works against every man, woman and child, how we are ruled and governed by an Orwellian system under the guise of protection, but in reality it's all about ultimate control. Islam has been used as a tool, and this document kind of backs it up to a degree, as in we've got to understand the mentality and the people that are drawing these documents. These people do not adhere to the Muslim faith. Some believe that the mentality behind people who do this is more of a satanistic quality. Now, there is satanistic traits within the way people can talk about people like they mean nothing, and you can ultimately change parts of the world, if not the world in total, for your ultimate agenda without first really being honest with the public citizens of this world. We have to remember that this is the establishment that is casting this over us all. Looking at it just through the Islam eyes is like trying to put a plaster on a wound that requires 200 to 300 stitches inside and outside. It's simply inefficient. The base level is predictable, and with that you can lose your liberties pretty quickly, because as we can see in this paper, They use all types of propaganda in order to vilify people who want to critique it, at the same time heap more human rights on the people that they deemed as the vulnerable.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the Environment and Development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as the comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. These objectives include an end to national sovereignty, the abolition of private property, the restructure of the family unit, and increasing limitations and restrictions on mobility and individual opportunity.
That's what they say in this paper, pushing the vulnerability of these people, not telling the population the biggest element of all this that we're going through is one that a lot of people will not want to connect this dot, but this dot is there whether they want to see it or not. This dot is what used to be called Agenda 21. Now it is renamed to Agenda 2030. This Agenda 2030 is referenced in this document so many times it shouts at you. If anybody does not know about Agenda 21, now named Agenda 2030, I suggest you look it up. This is what it's all about. Changing the face of the planet. Making the planet more sustainable in their eyes and more controllable in their eyes. So in order to do it, they need to migrate people from one end of the globe to the other in order to make vast swathes of this globe inhospitable for people and under nature laws, because the earth cannot be scratched. People are a cancer that we have to be controlled. So it will mean sustainability, which means a control on your consumption, a control on the way that people think that they need to live their freedoms. Or revolt does not mean anything. You're now part of an agenda that wants to mass migrate people, agenda that then wants to keep people within a small contained area but largely populated, almost living on top of one another.
The green goal includes the listings of what's not sustainable. A couple of the examples include private property.
728 lists fossil fuels.
Golf courses and ski lodges are not.
Consumerism.
Irrigation is not sustainable.
Paved roads.
Commercial agriculture.
Herbicides, pesticides. Elsewhere, it lists farmlands, pastures, grazing of livestock.
And the family unit. You see, I sat on the Santa Cruz Agenda 21 committees. Now, this was a lot of crazy ideas. This was back in the mid-90s. Crazy ideas I heard. Mother Earth's surface wasn't to be scratched. Human beings were to be concentrated into human settlement zones. Educational systems were to focus on the environment as the central organizing principle. All aspects of life were covered. Well, I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
All demographics, all religions, so you can imagine if you feel that life with some now is incompatible, what's it going to look like in 20, 30 years? Imagine with all the social issues with now, with the incompatibility and the lack of assimilation, imagine what it will be like in 20, 30 years. Imagine the curtailment of speech and rights in 20, 30 years when this gets to bubbling level and all you've got is flash mobs, all you've got is dissidents, all you've got is insect tribal fighting between everyone.
In 1992, while the Rio conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In Santa Cruz, we've got a 2-lane freeway system. We need 4, but what we're getting is hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money to take a dilapidated rail line that Southern Pacific wants to put in the hands of somebody else so that a commuter line can be built along the railroad track. That'll be followed by 14-story buildings where people will live and stack them in pack them units, where developers or so-called sustainable developers will build these high rises with federal dollars. In fact, Santa Cruz has received a $300 million federal grant to build the first 3,000 of these stack them and pack them units. The County Board of Supervisors has said, if you are a sustainable developer, you're immune from any construction defect liability. It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The Smart Growth Program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state